My name is Rani Haroon, and I'm one of the co-founders at High Counselor. So today, we're going to present a day in the life of a product manager with our guest speaker, David Abercrombie. The agenda for today's event is actually going to be very simple. We'll start with a quick introduction of High Counselor and our guest speaker. Then we'll move to the main topic of the event, which is essentially going to be a Q&A session. So please don't be shy and ask questions. So this webinar is for you. So for those who are not familiar with us and what we do is we essentially occasionally, pretty much a few times a month, we invite guest speakers from prominent companies who have some really interesting roles and a very interesting experience to share with you guys, whether you're looking for a job and are looking to get into the same industry as our company insiders, or simply curious to find out what our guest speakers do. So again, please don't be shy and feel free to ask any questions. Just a little housekeeping item. If you're not familiar with YouTube, if you want to ask questions, you essentially just need to, at the bottom right here of where you should see us, that's where you can find a little chat box, and that's where you can put in your question. So without further ado, I'm just going to get started very quick with High Counselor David. Quick introduction, and then we'll start our Q&A.
Sounds good.
So first, let's get started with the little intro. So High Counselor, so for those who are not familiar with us, and what we do is essentially we connect job seekers and professionals with company insiders and industry experts. So as I'm sure you all know, today the key to land a job at a company, the key is really getting a job referrals. That would be, that's like the holy grail. That's the ideal. That's the ideal thing you need to get you your foot in door at any company. So it's extremely difficult to get a job at a top company unless you know someone on the inside who can give you an edge over the tons of other applicants. High Counselor can instantly connect you with the company insider from your dream company and help you get the coaching you need to dramatically increase your chances to land a job. So enough about High Counselor for now. Let's introduce our guest speaker, David. At this stage, if you can please go ahead and tell us your story. I'm just going to show you here because I think right now I'm still sharing my screen. Here you go. So now we should be able to show you. So if you can give us a little intro about yourself, what you do, your background, and all that fun stuff.
Okay. So, excuse me, I've been in product management since 2002, mostly in cybersecurity. And actually, when I was in college, I wanted to be an accountant and then got into finance. So things just kind of happened and the network kind of connected me and I ended up in IT. But just by chance, I was actually working in managed services at Internet Security Systems, and some reorg changes led to an opportunity in product management, and I've been there ever since. So worked at companies, Cisco, SourceFire, Internet Security Systems, IBM, a smaller company called Sios Technology. So obviously something that kind of just happened into the role, but something, product management is something I love. So it's a nice opportunity to talk with you about my experiences.
Okay. And then can you tell us a little bit more about your role? Essentially, what is your day-to-day work look like as a product manager?
Sure. So just a product manager is responsible for every aspect of product or products. That's not only understanding market trends, customer requirements, mapping that to requirements the engineering will implement, but dealing with P&L, customer support issues, some of the less fun, frankly, tasks like creating SKUs and things of that nature that just go along, the things you have to do to make sure the product can actually be sold. Also interacting with, it's really cool in that product managers interact with a bunch of different parts of the organization. Obviously engineering, tech support, you contribute to, depending on how the organization is structured, interact with product marketing and provide subject matter expertise for collateral and stuff like that. On a day-to-day basis, it can change. The one thing I'll say is it depends on the company, but in larger companies, you get a lot of email. That typically is still the way folks communicate. You have a lot of meetings, but other than some of the more mundane tasks there, you're almost daily working with engineering to make sure all the priorities are aligned. Other than that, there's typically going to be, depending on where your product is and its lifetime, if you're lucky enough, you'll have the opportunity to work on products from concept to market. So doing market research, a strategy, competitive is something that is an ongoing basis too, and just keeping an eye on the news and the market trends and everything, because especially in cybersecurity, everything changes so much. It's really important to stay on top of what things that are happening out there that wouldn't impact your customers.
Okay, thank you for that, David. So I'm just looking here on our YouTube channel and see if anyone has a question. It looks like we got a question here from Paul. How can students begin their preparation for product management as a career in college?
That's a great question. And like I said, in my own experience, I kind of just happened into the role, was actually going down a different path. It depends on the industry that you want to go to or the type of products. But what I've seen specifically in the technology side is a combination of a technical degree, computer science, computer information systems, and an MBA. It's not a necessity, but a combination of technical background along with business skills is huge. And like Randy said, the most important thing you can do is make contacts way before you get out of school. If you can get, like at Cisco and other companies have the opportunity to do internships. So for example, we had one gentleman come to work that over the summer period did a market trend research around cloud security, for example. So if you can get, just like with any type of job, get internships, find mentors, and things like that will be hugely helpful. But like I said, in my experience, I've seen a lot of desire in the hiring to have technical and business focuses.
Is there, so just a quick follow-up question, is there any specific technical background that we could recommend Paul to, to follow to increase his chances to get a job as a product manager?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't pick up the first part.
Is there a specific, I would say, technical skill or any specific technical background that you can think of that you would recommend?
Yes. So my answer is going to be a little bit biased because I've been in cybersecurity and technical. We see a lot of folks with engineering degrees, not necessarily computer engineering, but engineering degrees, a lot in computer sciences, science with MBAs.
Science with them, yes.
And
Okay.
there's also some things that I don't know the specifics right off the top of my head, but there are some boot camps that offer in colleges, Georgia Tech, for example, that you can go to as well. So it's not a full curriculum for a degree, but kind of quick way to get technical skills. So that's one area you can look at.
Okay. For another question here from Jana, who's wondering what is the a typical product manager interview like?
Yeah, so it can vary. I've had a few over my career. You could have 5. I've had upwards of 10 different interviews. It depends on what the company wants to do. You'll talk from not just the hiring manager, but you'll talk to other stakeholders, engineering, product management, excuse me, IT, things of that nature. So there's a couple of different things. The interviewer is going to, who the interviewer is going to kind of dictate the type of questions that you get. But one thing that I've seen consistently is questions around critical thinking, what problems you faced and how you would go about solving them. Some companies will actually give you homework assignments to go off and demonstrate how you think through solving a problem. The other one is that's real important to understand is almost everybody will ask you about conflict resolution. So something that's happened in your experience in what you've done. So the ways to look at that is the best thing you can do. And the answer here is be very brief and to the point. So understanding, kind of look at it in 3 kind of sections, if you will, in conflict resolution is a situation, what the situation was, the action, what action you took, and what the result was. That's very common to understand. And that's you'll always get questions. All your interviewers will ask you about your experience. Some of them may or may not have taken the time to look through LinkedIn or resume or things like that. But they'll also ask questions that kind of the undertone being personality. So just asking questions about cultural or how you interact with your peers and all, just to understand, because you could be the smartest person in the world. And if there's a kind of a perception of incompatibility or as far as personality goes in a particular company's culture, that could be a red flag. So that's generally what we see. So the other thing too that you have to remember in these, that before you go into an interview, excuse me, make sure you understand what the company is doing and some of at least the macro trends, because they will want you to have an understanding of the specific market there, and rather than just general product management experience, but show that you understand and have done some homework around what the company does and how the market trends might impact them.
Okay, then yeah, that makes sense, and that's really good advice. And I think actually that would apply, I would say, to any company. You always want to do some research on the company and make sure you really show that you've done some research and and are really interested in finding more about the company you're interviewing for.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was going to kind of reiterate, excuse me, what you said about what high counselor does. If you can get, particularly if you're more of entry level out of college, interview preps are key, because there are people, you talk to people that go through interviews and they can ask questions, and there's specific ways that you're going to want to answer them. So that sort of access to resources for interview prep is essential.
Thank you, David. Let's see. Looks like we got another question here from Claudia. She's wondering if product managers typically focus just on the technical aspects of developing product.
No, it's much more than that. I'll say it depends a lot because it depends on the product and all, but on how technical it is. But you got to understand the technical aspects of it so that you can have intelligent conversations with engineering and with sales engineers and other folks. But it's really business is a big part of it. At the end of the day, the idea is to make money by solving problems for your customers. So a lot of it's focused on the main focus really is on understanding the market trends and the problems that you're trying to solve, understanding kind of breaking down the segmentations in the market and creating a really solid strategy around what it is you want to go do. And obviously there are financial aspects of that too. So the technical aspects to me are kind of more fun talking about that stuff, but the business side is really fascinating as well. So it's kind of a split between, like I said, it'll depend on the type of product that you own. Cybersecurity, you have to be very technical, just like I said, to understand or be able to communicate with engineering. And when you're talking to customers, the customers will always have the more technical folks in there because they're the ones that use your product. So you have to stay sharp on the technical side. That's really what makes product management so cool, is the mix of technical and business.
And is there like one that's more predominant than another on a day-to-day basis? It sounds like it would be more business than technical.
It is more business, and it depends on where you are in your product life cycle. So if you've got a legacy product that's kind of hanging out there, you're dealing with more of day-to-day helping prioritize bugs to work on, or platform support, or more inbound things on the product. But then when you're talking about newer products where you're setting the strategy, yeah, you spend a lot of time making sure that your strategy is you're solving the problem you want to solve. You have a solid strategy and a solid plan to execute that. So yeah, and you're also responsible for obviously the P&L and the products, which means you're heavily involved in the pricing, which has competitive analysis tied in there, but you're also responsible for reporting to like quarterly business reviews, or maybe even something more frequent, where you're going to talk about the business aspects, like financially, how's it performing, customer experience, things of that nature. So yeah, I would agree that it's more focused on the business side.
So in that case, then a follow-up question. So for someone who comes from a technical background, then it sounds like in that case, if someone wants to really continue learning more technical stuff, that's probably not going to happen, right?
You can. So I'm lucky enough to be able to stay really technical, but there is a lot of business side to it, but it's not just technical. So depends on the organization, but there are roles called technical product managers, technical marketing engineers that help the product manager focus on solving the problem and all, but are more skewed towards the technical side. So more interaction with implementation. The engineering is suggesting more technical conversations with customers, creating content for training. So there is a track on that side. Like I said, it's either a TPM or a TME. That the names are different, but most companies have separate tracks. If you want to be in PM but still focus more on the technical side, that's available.
Okay, that's good to know. Looking here to see if we have more questions. So another question here from Prashant. Is wondering, in terms of career path for product manager, what is the typical, I would say, path?
Well, it used to be, when I first started my career, the natural progression would be an entry-level PM, senior PM, and move up to director roles and start taking on people manager responsibilities, but I've seen definitely in the last few years, there is also an individual contributor track. Some people don't want to be people managers, especially in really large companies. So there are two paths to where you could go to where you're a people manager and you run a team of PMs, or if you prefer to be an individual contributor, you still have different levels, so entry level, senior, principal, and so forth. So I found that it's if you don't want to go down the people manager path, that's not necessarily required in order for you to succeed. So you have a couple paths there.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, David. A question here from Theo. What are the most common challenges that PM typically faces?
Challenges, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, great question. And the one thing I'll probably say multiple times, so apologies for the redundancy, but prioritization is key. So that's not just prioritization of features for your products, but it's tasks. So because a product manager is kind of the center of everything and is interacting with all other stakeholders and organizations within a company, you'll be constantly asked to do things and you can't do everything at once at the same time. So you have to basically, depending on what your goals are, make sure that you prioritize according to that. One thing I learned early on from a great manager and mentor that I had is you have to basically say, be able to say no. If you don't say no, you don't have a strategy. So there's a lot of saying no, which is another challenge for a PM, is that you're telling other people in your organization that need something from you, no, I can't do that right now, or customers asking for features. It's a lot of saying no there. The other challenge is depending on the organization, and because you're a PM, you're the champion of the product or your products, is going to be competing for resources. So no company has an unlimited amount of engineering resources to get stuff done. So that's part of the fun, right? I mean, it's your job is to be the champion and work with other peers and other groups that are competing for the same resources. But it still is very challenging. I mean, that's why one of the most important things that you need to understand as a PM is to be very data driven and less anecdotal. So when you're going in and making a case, your business cases, or asking for resources or asking for decisions to be made, it needs to be heavily data driven. The other thing too is depending on the organization and your products is the balance between a legacy product and what we call a new shiny object. So you've got a legacy product line that's kind of paying the bills and kind of making a steady stream of money. How much you want to put on that versus how much you want to focus on maybe a brand new product that you're introducing to address a major market trend. So it's difficult to balance those things out. But I'd say definitely prioritization of daily tasks, the backlog, engineering is just, again, you're going to be asked to do a lot of different things. And the other important part with the prioritization is to make sure you set expectations with whoever's asking for stuff. So don't overpromise and underdeliver, in other words. So prioritization is probably the most important skill and the biggest challenge that I've faced.
Okay. And is this something that you have like a recommendation or an advice on how our young audience there, as they start their career, how they can develop that skill?
I don't know if there's some, I mean, that's part of mentoring as well and talking to experienced PMs on how they handle it. The most important thing is, and it depends, some people are really task driven, very organized. It could be as simple as making lists based on your priorities. The other thing too that will drive that is if your company has MBOs or other things like goals that you have for a specific time period, that will affect your prioritization But really, it's just to have a plan. Like in terms of prioritization in features and functionality in the product, it all has to map to your strategy. You have to have a strategy, and that typically has pillars underneath that. And everything that you do should drive towards those goals to go after that strategy. But just in terms of tools, I mean, I've used Post-it notes and Excel, Smartsheet, and things like that. But it's really just making sure you understand what, and this is part, the young PM, it's the responsibility of, well, both of you, but it's the responsibility of you and your manager to understand what your priorities should be. So you'll get help from your manager to understand. I mean, that's why they're there. Will help you prioritize. And the most important thing there is just to make sure you have constant communication with your manager and peers as well. And make sure everything you're doing is driving to achieve goals.
Okay, thank you, David. Let's see here. So what is, because the main, I'd say, topic of today's webinar is ultimately the goal is to teach and show what makes product managers successful. So in your expertise, what makes a product manager successful?
Being focused on the customer problems, because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You have to be open-minded. Because one of the challenges I didn't mention in the challenges question, but is the relationship between engineering and product management. Some people think that it needs to be adversarial. I disagree with that. There's a such thing as positive tension, which means you're pushing each other, but you're still driving towards the same goals. So the open-mindedness, because the engineering will think different than you and vice versa. Within a PM organization, you could have older PMs like myself and newer entry-level PMs that think differently. So each side needs to think, they may go about solving problems differently. So you need to be able to learn from each other. So open-mindedness is huge. Communication is huge. So one of the things that you'll do more often than not is communicate one way or the other, whether you're doing a presentation, you're sending an email, whatever. So communication skills, as far as what a PM needs, is huge. That's both verbal, visual. You'll communicate via PowerPoint more often than not, I found. And that's very important. So in my background, I was terrified of public speaking before I got my TPM job. And that forced it out of me real quick. You start to present, but as a PM, you will present not only to your peers, but executives, customers, and other organizations. So working on your presentation skills is absolutely essential.
That's great. Thank you, David. Let's see, another question here. I think from Tio, and I think you already touched on that. As far as managing others, I think you did mention that product managers, they don't often do that, but they may or may not. It's really, I think, depending on I guess what they. It seems like, I think you mentioned that they have essentially the option if they want to manage others, depending on the level.
Yeah, that's actually a great point that I didn't fully go into, is that one of the challenge that comes, especially when you're an individual contributor like I am, is you often work with other groups. So it could be other product lines, but it's other organizations within a company, and you have to be able to influence without having direct supervisory role over someone. That's very common. So it's often, they're not even dotted lines. You're just getting a group of people together and you want to drive your product or specific initiatives. that you're able to influence without being someone's manager. But like I mentioned, there is the other path where you could be a people manager. But even if you are a people manager, you're still going to have in that role to work with other organizations without having a direct supervisory role.
So so what you're saying is that even if you're a people manager, you just want to make sure that I understand. So do you still get to also manage the product directly somehow, or do you manage it through others, through the people that you manage?
It depends on the size of the company. Typically, if you're, say, at director level, your subordinates will actually do the day-to-day PM. But as the director, you are responsible for making sure the strategy is coherent, upward communication to superiors, really being a champion for your employees and always having their best interests in mind. But typically, you wouldn't, as a people manager, directly manage the products. But it could vary.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm just looking at here and see if there is any other question. It looks like we're all good. Just going to give them another minute, and while we're waiting, I just wanted to get, I guess, your thought on maybe last advice, anything that we haven't covered that you think would be relevant for our discussion here as we try to really help our audience either get a job in product management or making it easier for them to get a job.
Well, sorry to be redundant here, but what we talked about before is creating the network. I'm not a giant fan of social media, but I love LinkedIn. Definitely look to see if you can get if you have a strong LinkedIn profile, you may be contacted by recruiters for interns. I would highly recommend that. So getting that experience prior to graduation is essential, but being able to create a network, it's that almost every job I've gotten is because of somebody I knew. So that's very important. So in the counselors, the high counselor, or myself, other people can help make connections because we frequently get requests from recruiters if looking for certain roles. So developing a network is absolutely huge, but I'd say making sure LinkedIn, your skills are updated, in everything. Make sure it's very clear what it is that you would like to do, what you're skilled in. And a lot of times the opportunities will come to you, but it's very much like Randy said earlier, trying to get a job without having a connection is very, very difficult. A good resume, cover letter, things like that could go a long way, but you're in much better shape if you can get somebody to make an introduction into a company.
Okay, thank you, David, and that provides really a great segue for me to actually wrap up this webinar. So thank you again so much, David. So for those that are listening, as David said, I mean, today, to get a job at pretty much any company, small, big, tech, whatever industry it's in, knowing someone on the inside is really key. And I share your experience, David. For me also, all the jobs that I've had, you know, it has always been thanks to someone who, you know, who handed my resume to the right people. So having knowing someone on the inside and getting a referral is really the key, and that's exactly what High Counselor tries to do. So again, simply depending on, based on your industry, your role, the type of help you need, you can simply just log on to our platform, search for counselor or company insider, and just connect with them, and again, it will, I'm sure, help you. Thank you again so much, David, for taking the time to do this webinar with us. We've learned a lot, and thank you. So we'll invite you again really soon. Okay.
All right. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.